Clint Eastwood used to be nobody. Then he put on a poncho, lit a cigar, and blew a hole in the Western movie playbook. He had no name. He played by no rules. All he did was star in one low-budget Italian flick that turned him, a TV sidekick, into the scariest man in Hollywood. And since then, this guy didn't need a badge or a backstory. All he had to do was to show up, stay quiet, and kill the entire idea of the clean-cut cowboy. This is the story of how A Fistful of Dollars made Clint Eastwood a legend and why movies were never the same again. But how did one cheap Western flip the whole genre and Clint's life on its head? My name is Sam, and this is Western Files. And now, let's rewind to where it all started. Part 1. The Shot That Lit the Fuse. 1964. Spain. Some knockoff Mexican border town made of splinters and sand. Clint Eastwood strikes a match and lights a cigar. He doesn't speak. He doesn't blink. He just squints, looking like he's about to shoot the sun. Yet that stare. Boom! It broke the Western genre clean in half, and it made Clint a ghost with a gun. Before that, he was just another nice guy on rawhide. He smiled a lot back then. He was completely harmless. But Eastwood later said it bored him to death, said it felt like being dry toast with a heartbeat. Meanwhile, in Rome, Sergio Leone was cooking up something wild. He didn't want your dad's Western. No, he wanted stubble and shootouts that felt like standoffs with fate. No clean heroes, no long monologues, just sweat and a lot of close-ups. He had a script. He had a plan. What he didn't have, however, was a face. So Leone went hunting and hunting. First, he tried to land Henry Fonda, James Coburn, even Charles Bronson. But Fonda and Coburn cost too much. And Bronson, he read the script but hated it, said it was the worst thing he'd ever seen. But then, someone mentioned Clint Eastwood. They said he was cheap to get, that he was able and willing, and that he was totally fed up with network TV. So Leone shrugged. He didn't mind, because why not? Eastwood didn't think twice. He said yes. He saw something in Sergio's vision. So he hopped on a plane to Europe. He may not get the glory that every up-and-coming actor dreamed of, but it was well worth a shot. In turn, he got a decent check and a shot at something different. And for his part, he got $15,000 and a Mercedes. Not bad, eh? At least it was better than another season of yes-sirring his way through rawhide. But here's the thing. Back then, doing a spaghetti western was a huge gamble. They were seen as knockoff nonsense with dubbed audio, chopped-up reels, and stolen soundtracks. But Eastwood didn't care. He read the script. It was bare bones, but sharp, and the character didn't talk much, didn't explain himself. All he had to do was simply show up, shoot people, and leave town. And Eastwood loved that. So he took the role, and it changed everything. As for the movie, oh, it was a total bootleg, a wild remix of Kurosawa's Yojimbo, except that the samurai swords were swapped for 6 shooters, and they had no real budget. Half the crew didn't even speak the same language. Heck, even Leone barely spoke any English. And at the same time, Eastwood didn't speak any Italian. Yet they made the whole thing on shoulder shrugs and hand signals, and somehow it worked. A Fistful of Dollars has a cult, comic book intensity. It is the punk rock of westerns, as critic Peter Bradshaw once put it, and he wasn't wrong. Eastwood stripped his acting down to the base wire. No speeches, barely any lines, just stillness. That slow walk, that squint. He simply let the silence do the heavy lifting, and it landed like a powerful punch. And it turns out the soon-to-be man with no name wasn't a good guy. He wasn't even a bad guy pretending to be good. He just played both sides and cashed in. And the people loved it. No noble speeches, no clean endings, just metal, blood, and double crosses. However, not everyone loved that change. The calculated sadism of the film would be offensive were it not for the neutralizing laughter aroused by the ludicrousness of the whole exercise, wrote critic Philip French. He meant it as a jab, but it read like proof the movie had hit a nerve. Nevertheless, the result was bewildering. Europe lost its mind. The film blew up overseas. And when it finally made it to the States, it was game over. Eastwood wasn't the nice guy from TV anymore. He was the guy. But we'll talk more about that later. But that squint? Oh boy, it kicked off a whole new kind of Western. A rougher one, a meaner one, a hungrier one. And with that single scene, the door swung open to a wild gamble, one that would soon pay off beyond Eastwood's wildest dreams. Part 2, Becoming the Man with No Name. Now let's talk a bit about the making. You see, when he signed on for A Fistful of Dollars, he didn't wait for costume fittings. No, he built the character from the ground up, starting with the look. The poncho? He found it himself in a shop in Spain. It was heavy, scratchy, and olive green with a weird white pattern. It looked like it hadn't been washed since the Civil War. It was perfect. And the hat? It was flat-brimmed, low-crowned, beat to hell. It wasn't some clean store-bought 10-gallon. It looked like it had been through a shootout or two and won. It sat on his head like it belonged there. As for the cigars, he picked the short, thick, nasty ones. He hated smoking though, but he bit down on those stogies like they were part of his face. The taste may have been awful, but the look? Oh, it was unforgettable. Every piece of his costume said the same thing: stay out of my way. And then, he did what he was expected to do. He got quiet. Clint barely spoke. No rants, no cowboy wisdom, just long stares, slow walks, and one-liners that hit like gunshots. The silence was the performance. Apparently, that was the trick. The less he gave you, the more you leaned in and got absorbed into the film. And his character wasn't clean, wasn't noble. He might help you, might rob you. But you watched anyway because he felt real and dangerous. No white hat like before, no handshake with the sheriff. This was the guy who'd shoot first, loot the badge, and keep walking. Then Ennio Morricone showed up with no money and no proper music and made a soundtrack out of whatever he could grab. Gunshots for drums, whistling like wind through a canyon. And that electric guitar? Oh, that background noise stared at you, hard. The music was basically the scene, and the whole film felt loud, stylized, and unapologetically strange. Leone's A Fistful of Dollars feels as if it hasn't aged a day since its initial release in 1964, wrote Chuck Bowen. The film's opening credit sequence is more vigorous and exciting than most entire modern movies for its simplicity and boldness, for its willingness to risk ludicrousness so as to inspire an operatic level of emotion. An illustrated silhouette of a man on a mule gallops against a blank backdrop while Ennio Morricone's remarkable score whips up a fevered tone of comic malevolence. That wasn't just the intro, you know. It was a warning shot. With Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo as his template, Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars helped define a new era for the Western and usher in its most iconic star, Clint Eastwood. That's how Rotten Tomatoes summed it up, and it definitely nailed the point. So yeah, like I said, Sergio and Eastwood cracked the whole Western genre open and rewired the whole thing. The poncho stayed, the squint stayed, and the silence. It stuck around for decades. But now that he had the look, the myth was starting to take shape. All he needed next was a bigger picture to burn it into. Part 3. Stardom hits like a bullet to the face. Clint Eastwood eventually exploded. As critic Sean Axmaker put it, this was a new kind of Western, cynical, violent, stylish, and austere, playing out in a landscape of endless deserts and clapboard towns infested with gunmen. Back when A Fistful of Dollars dropped in Italy in '64, it tore the place up. Nearly 15 million tickets. Now that's pure blockbuster level before the word blockbuster meant anything. Overnight, the Italian film industry realized the cowboy genre didn't belong to America anymore. However, it took 3 years and a legal scuffle with Kurosawa before it reached U.S. theaters. But when it did, in '67, it landed like a sucker punch, $4.5 million on a shoestring budget. No big stars, no flashy press. Truly, American viewers have never seen anything like it. Their usual cowboys usually gave speeches and wore clean shirts. Eastwood, however, rolled in dirty, deadly, and cold as hell. And then, after A Fistful of Dollars lit the fuse, Eastwood didn't slow down at all. He reloaded. For a few dollars more, hit the scene in 1965. Eastwood used the same poncho, but packed on new heat. And that was when Lee Van Cleef showed up. Now here was another stone-faced and sharp character playing Colonel Mortimer, a bounty hunter with a brain and a score to settle. And Sergio Leone dialed it up with more standoffs and more slow burns. As for Morricone, he went off the rails in the best way possible. And Eastwood was now charging 50 grand a squint. Not bad at all. But then came the big one. The good, the bad, and the ugly. In 1966. Now this masterpiece was a cinematic gunshot that remained golden for decades. 3 men, 1 grave, no breathing room. Eastwood played as Blondie. The good, kind of. Van Cleef was the bad, no argument there. And Eli Wallach. He was the ugly in every sense. Loud, unpredictable, and unforgettable. And the beauty in all this was that their chemistry snapped, all 3 of them. And the music stabbed, hard. The graveyard standoff, pure film school. Leone turned a stare into a scream. That final sequence burned into film history. And by now, Eastwood was untouchable. The poncho, the stare, the quiet rage, this was all a master signature. Yet, he wasn't about to coast. Oh no. In '71, he ditched the horse for a cop badge. Dirty Harry hit like a warhammer. Inspector Callahan didn't ask questions. He just pointed the .44 Magnum and dared you to move. The guy bent and crushed every rule, and the film tore through the box office and kicked off a whole series. Then, in the same year, he starred in a new move, Play Misty for Me. And this time, Eastwood directed it himself. No cowboys, no guns, just obsession, paranoia, and a slow boil that proved he could steer a story without hiding behind the famous squint. But then, 2 years later, he flipped the Western genre on its head harder than ever before. High Plains Drifter came in '73. Here, Eastwood plays a ghost, or maybe a demon, or maybe both. He basically rides into a cursed town to settle a score no one wants to talk about. It wasn't exactly a hero's tale, but none of it touched Unforgiven in 1992. This time, Eastwood was older, worn down, and that's exactly who William Money was. A washed-up killer dragged back into the muck for one last job. No glory, no justice, just violence with a hangover. Eastwood directed it too. He also starred in it. Unforgiven cleaned up at the Oscars and closed the whole damn book. And the myth ended with the man who built it. And when it was all over, nothing looked the same. Clint had changed. Hollywood had changed. The Western genre was reborn into something else entirely. Eastwood walked in nameless and left unforgettable. So you see, sometimes one shot is all it takes. And in this case, Eastwood's shot rewrote the rules.